The town of Moab. Utah had branded her with a reputation that followed like a shadow, and Delilah Jenkins had learned to wear it like armor even though it cut her deep every single day. She stood at the wooden counter of the general store in the scorching summer heat of 1882, counting out coins for flour and beans, while Mrs. Patterson deliberately turned her back and served another customer who had entered after her. The message was clear. In a town where marriageable women were scarce and men outnumbered them 3-1, Delilah was the one woman nobody wanted. It had started 5 years ago when she was 18, fresh-faced and hopeful, working as a seamstress in her late mother's shop. Thomas McKinney had courted her properly for 3 months before proposing marriage. She had said yes with a heart full of dreams. Then his mother had arrived from St. Louis, taken one look at Delilah and declared her unworthy. Too tall, too plain, too strong-minded, hands too rough from work. Thomas had broken their engagement the very next day without even meeting her eyes. The humiliation had been devastating, but worse was yet to come. 2 more men had shown interest over the following years. Both times, their families or friends had intervened. The whispers grew louder. Something must be wrong with her. A woman that men kept rejecting must have some hidden flaw, some darkness that made her unfit for marriage and motherhood. The logic was cruel and circular, but it stuck. Each rejection made the next more likely, and soon no man in Moab would risk the social ridicule of courting the woman everyone else had passed over. At 23, Delilah had stopped hoping. She lived alone in the small house her mother had left her, took in sewing and mending, and kept her head high even when women crossed the street to avoid her and men looked through her as though she were invisible. She had learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity, chopping her own wood, repairing her own roof, handling tasks that made the town gossips cluck their tongues and say it proved she was too masculine, too independent, too everything that a proper woman should not be. She was leaving the general store empty-handed, Mrs. Patterson having refused to serve her at all, when she collided with a man coming up the wooden steps. The impact sent her stumbling backward, and strong hands caught her arms, steadying her before she could fall. "Pardon me, miss." "I was not watching where I was going." Delilah looked up into the face of a stranger, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking green gold, the color of sunlight through honey, and they looked at her with genuine concern and something else she had not seen in a long time. He was actually seeing her, not looking through her or past her. "No harm done," she managed, stepping back quickly. His hands released her immediately, but he did not move away. "I am afraid I am new to town and already making a poor first impression." His smile was warm and reached those unusual eyes. "Ryder Ferguson, I just signed on as foreman at the Copper Ridge Ranch. Delilah Jenkins." She waited for the flicker of recognition, the subtle shift in expression that would tell her someone had already warned him about her. But his smile did not waver. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Jenkins. Would you happen to know if this store sells saddle soap? My tack needs some serious attention after 3 weeks on the trail." "They do. 3rd shelf on the right as you enter." She should walk away now before someone saw them talking and poisoned him against her, but something kept her rooted to the spot. "I appreciate the help." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture of respect that felt foreign and wonderful. "Perhaps I will see you around town." "Perhaps," she said, though she doubted it. Once he learned who she was, or rather what she was known as, he would avoid her like everyone else. Delilah walked home through the dusty streets, trying not to think about golden green eyes and a smile that had made her feel like a normal woman for 30 seconds. She had work to do. Mrs. Chen had brought her 3 dresses to alter, and the banker's wife needed a torn hem repaired by tomorrow. The work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, which was exactly what she needed. But that evening, as she sat on her small porch in the cooling air, she found herself remembering the stranger's voice, the way he had looked at her as though she mattered. It was dangerous to dwell on such things. Ryder Ferguson would learn soon enough that speaking to her was social suicide in Moab, and that would be the end of it. She was wrong. The next morning, she found him at her door, hat in hand, with a torn shirt draped over his arm. "Miss Jenkins, I hope I am not intruding. Mrs. Chen mentioned you are the finest seamstress in town, and I have need of someone who can repair this without making it look like it went through a threshing machine." Delilah stared at him, then at the shirt. It was a clean rip along the shoulder seam, easily mended. "Mrs. Chen sent you here," she did. "Said you are a miracle worker with a needle." He seemed completely at ease, no hint of discomfort or reluctance in his manner. She should tell him to go elsewhere. Having him seen at her door would only damage his standing in town, but the work was there, and she needed the income. Besides, a small, rebellious part of her wanted to talk to someone who did not look at her with scorn or pity. "Come in." "I can fix that in about 20 minutes if you want to wait, or you can pick it up this evening." "I will wait, if that is acceptable. I am curious to watch someone who comes so highly recommended at work." He followed her into the small front room that served as her workspace. The morning sun streamed through the clean windows, illuminating the neat shelves of thread, the carefully organized baskets of buttons and trim, the dress form in the corner wearing a half-finished gown. It was a humble space, but it was hers, and she kept it immaculate. Ryder settled into the chair she indicated, seeming perfectly comfortable in the domestic setting. Most men she knew would have been awkward and eager to escape, but he watched with genuine interest as she threaded her needle and began working on the torn seam with small, precise stitches. "How long have you been a seamstress?" he asked. "Since I was 12. My mother taught me. She ran this shop before she passed 4 years ago. I am sorry for your loss. It must have been difficult losing her and taking on the business so young." The sympathy in his voice sounded real, not performative. Delilah kept her eyes on her work, not trusting herself to look at him. "I manage. The work keeps me occupied. Mrs. Chen spoke very highly of you. She said you are honest, skilled, and reliable. Those are rare qualities, Mrs. Chen is kind." Delilah knew the older woman was one of the few people in town who treated her decently, perhaps because as a Chinese immigrant she understood something about being unwanted. She also said something else. Ryder's tone became quieter, more serious. "She said the people in this town are fools who cannot see what is right in front of them. I got the impression she was not talking about sewing skills." Delilah's hands stilled on the fabric. "Mr. Ferguson, I should tell you that being seen associating with me will not help your standing in Moab. I have a certain reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind where I am known as the woman no man wanted. 3 broken engagements and courtships. The good people of this town have decided something must be fundamentally wrong with me, and they treat me accordingly." She forced herself to look at him, expecting to see the subtle withdrawal, the cooling of interest. Instead, his expression had hardened into something that looked like anger, though not directed at her. "Let me make sure I understand. You have been rejected by foolish men, and instead of recognizing their loss, this town has decided to punish you for it. That is a generous interpretation. Most people assume the men saw something deficient in me. Then most people are idiots," he said it flatly, with absolute conviction. "I have been in town 3 days, Miss Jenkins. In that time, I have met the banker's daughter who giggles like a hyena and has the conversational depth of a puddle. I have met the widow Patterson who runs the general store and treats her customers like they should be grateful. She allows them to spend money in her establishment. I have met at least a dozen other women, and not one of them had the grace, dignity, and quiet strength you showed when you picked yourself up after bumping into me and walked away with your head high, despite the fact that I later learned that woman in the store had just deliberately refused to serve you." Delilah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You saw that?" "I did. And I saw how you did not make a scene, did not plead or argue, you simply left. That takes more courage than most people have." She did not know what to say. The words felt dangerous like hope, and she had learned not to trust hope. "Your shirt is finished." She held it out to him, putting distance between them and the conversation that was stirring feelings she had buried deep. Ryder took the shirt, examining her work. The repair was nearly invisible, the stitches so fine, and even that the seam looked stronger than the original. "This is excellent work. What do I owe you?" 25 cents. He handed her a silver dollar. "Keep the change. Quality work deserves quality pay." "Mr. Ferguson, I cannot accept. You can and you will. I have a feeling I will be back with more work soon. I am hard on clothes." His smile returned, warm and genuine. "And I hope you will call me Ryder. Mr. Ferguson makes me feel like I should be sitting in a church pew." Despite herself, Delilah felt the corner of her mouth twitch into an almost smile. "Very well, Ryder. There, that was not so hard, was it?" He put on his hat, then paused at the door. "Miss Jenkins, would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow evening? There is a restaurant near the hotel that I am told serves a decent steak." The hope that had been stirring crashed into fear. "You should not be seen with me in public. It will cause talk." "Let them talk. I am asking if you would like to have dinner with me, not if the town gossips would approve." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You barely know me. Why would you risk your position here, your standing in the community?" Ryder met her eyes steadily. "Because in 3 days, you are the first person in this town who has treated me like a human being instead of either a potential meal ticket or a source of gossip. Because Mrs. Chen, who strikes me as an excellent judge of character, thinks highly of you. And because when I look at you, I see someone I would like to know better. Is that reason enough?" It was too much. It was everything she had stopped letting herself want. "I will think about it. That is all I ask." He tipped his hat again and left, whistling as he walked down her path to the street. Delilah closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. This was foolish, dangerous. He did not know what he was doing, what it would cost him. But the memory of his eyes, the genuine respect in his voice, the way he had called the town's treatment of her what it was cruel and unjust made something long dormant wake up inside her chest. She did not sleep well that night, torn between yearning and fear. By morning, she had decided to refuse him. It was the smart choice, the safe choice. She would protect him from the town's scorn even if he was too new and naive to protect himself. But when he appeared at her door at 5 o'clock the next evening, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt with his hair still damp from washing, with that hopeful look in his remarkable eyes, the word yes came out of her mouth before her practical mind could stop it. The walk to the restaurant took only 10 minutes, but in that time, Delilah felt every eye in town turn toward them. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Women whispered behind their hands. Men stared with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disapproval. Beside her, Ryder seemed completely unbothered, keeping up a steady stream of easy conversation about the ranch, the landscape, the surprising heat of Utah summers. The restaurant was small with only 8 tables, and when they entered, the proprietor's face went through several expressions before settling on professional courtesy. "Mr. Ferguson, a table for 2, please, Harrison, somewhere with a view of the street if you have it." They were seated by the window, which meant they were on full display to anyone passing by. Delilah knew this was deliberate on Ryder's part, a statement that he had nothing to hide. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "You are trying to make a point," she said quietly once they were alone. "I am trying to have dinner with a woman whose company I enjoy. If that makes a point, so be it." The meal that followed was the strangest and most wonderful evening Delilah had experienced in 5 years. Ryder talked about his life, his travels, the ranches he had worked from Texas to Montana. He had grown up in Colorado, learned ranching from his father before the man died when Ryder was 17. He had been working ranches ever since, saving money with the eventual dream of having his own land. "What brought you to Moab?" Delilah asked, finding herself genuinely curious, reputation mostly. "Copper Ridge is known for breeding quality horses. I wanted to learn from the best, and the foreman position opened up at the right time." He cut into his steak with obvious enjoyment. Plus, I heard Utah had spectacular landscape. They were not exaggerating. It is beautiful country, Delilah agreed, though brutal in its way. The summers are scorching, the winters bitter. Nothing comes easy here. The best things never do. His eyes held hers. Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with sewing or this town's ridiculous prejudices. What do you do when you are alone and can be exactly who you are? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her something like that in longer than she could remember. I read. I have a collection of books my mother left me, and I trade with Mrs. Chen for new ones when I can afford it, and I ride. You ride? His face lit up with interest. Do you have a horse? I do. A mare named Juniper. She's getting old now, but she was my mother's horse first. I keep her in the stable behind my house, and on Sundays I ride out into the canyon country. There is no one there to judge, no one to whisper, just rock and sky and silence. That sounds perfect. Would you take me sometime? I am new to this country and a guide would be invaluable. The ease with which he invited himself into her private sanctuary should have alarmed her, but instead she found herself smiling. Perhaps, if you prove you can handle the terrain. Is that a challenge, Miss Jenkins? It might be, Mr. Ferguson. They lingered over dinner longer than necessary, talking about books and horses and the peculiar beauty of the desert. Delilah found herself laughing at his stories about ranch mishaps and sharing her own memories of learning to ride as a girl. The stares from other diners faded into background noise. For a few hours, she forgot to be the woman nobody wanted and simply was herself. It was full dark when Ryder walked her home, the stars brilliant in the clear sky. At her door, he took off his hat and held it in his hands, suddenly looking younger and less certain. I enjoyed this evening more than I can express, he said. Would you allow me to call on you again, Ryder? You need to understand what you are doing. By tomorrow, the entire town will know you had dinner with me. Your boss will hear about it. People will question your judgment. They might even, Delilah. He said her name gently but firmly. I am a grown man who makes his own choices. I am good at my job and Copper Ridge needs me as much as I need the work. And even if that were not true, even if there were consequences, I would still want to see you again. The question is whether you want to see me. She looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an unexpected storm, disrupting everything she had accepted about her place in the world. Every practical instinct told her to protect herself, to refuse, to send him away before she started hoping again. But standing there in the starlight, seeing the genuine warmth in his eyes, feeling the unfamiliar flutter of possibility in her chest, she found she could not. Yes, she whispered, I would like that. His smile could have lit the entire street. Sunday then. You can show me these canyons you love, and I will prove I can handle the terrain. He left before she could change her mind, and Delilah went inside with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She was either making the best decision of her life or setting herself up for the worst heartbreak yet. Only time would tell which. The next days proved even more difficult than she had anticipated. The town had indeed noticed their dinner, and the gossip spread like wildfire. Women who had previously just ignored her now made pointed comments within her hearing about desperate men and scheming women. Mrs. Patterson refused to serve her at all now, forcing Delilah to buy supplies from the smaller, more expensive store on the other side of town. Even some of her sewing customers found excuses to take their business elsewhere, but Ryder was undeterred. He stopped by her house daily, sometimes with legitimate mending work, sometimes just to talk. He brought her supplies from the ranch stores when he learned she was being refused service. He met her hostility from the town with polite indifference and her own wariness with patient warmth. Sunday arrived with brilliant sunshine and temperatures already climbing toward uncomfortable. Delilah met Ryder at the stable behind her house, where Juniper waited patiently beside a sturdy gelding Ryder had borrowed from the ranch. His name is Copper, and according to the stable master he is steady as stone, Ryder said, patting the horse's neck. I hope he lives up to the recommendation. Delilah smiled. mounted Juniper with practiced ease, and led the way out of town toward the red rock canyons that rose like ancient fortresses to the east. The ride started easy, following well-worn trails, but as they moved deeper into the canyon country, the path became more challenging, winding between massive sandstone formations carved by wind and water over countless centuries. Ryder proved to be an excellent rider, handling copper with confidence and skill. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather and the rhythmic footfalls of the horses. The town fell away behind them until it felt like another world entirely. "I can see why you come here," Ryder said as they paused at a viewpoint overlooking a vast expanse of layered red rock. "It is humbling, makes human concern seem very small." "That is exactly why I love it." Delilah dismounted, and he followed suit. They stood side by side at the edge, the wind tugging at their clothes. "Out here, it does not matter what anyone thinks of me. The rocks do not care about broken engagements or reputation. They have been here for millions of years and will be here long after we are all dust." Delilah. Ryder's voice was serious. "Will you tell me what really happened with those men who rejected you?" She had known this question would come eventually. Part of her wanted to refuse to keep that pain private. But another part, the part that was beginning to trust him, wanted him to understand. "The first was Thomas McKinney. We courted properly and he proposed. I thought I knew him, thought he loved me. Then his mother came to town, took one look at me and decided I was not good enough for her son. Too tall, too plain, too poor. Thomas broke our engagement without a word of defense on my behalf. He just folded under her disapproval like I had meant nothing. He was a coward. Perhaps he saw what his mother saw." Delilah wrapped her arms around herself despite the heat. "The second was a merchant named William Cross. He courted me for 6 weeks before his business partner told him he would withdraw their partnership if William married me. Said it would be bad for their reputation to be associated with the woman McKinney had rejected. William chose his business. Also a coward. The third was a rancher from outside of town, Robert Fairchild. We had been seeing each other for 2 months, and I thought perhaps finally I had found someone who did not care about the talk. Then I overheard him at the saloon, betting with his friends about whether he could actually go through with marrying me. It was sport to him, a joke. I ended it that night." Ryder was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "Those men were not just cowards. They were cruel. And this town that judged you instead of them is full of people too caught up in their own small-mindedness to recognize strength and worth when it is standing right in front of them. You make it sound noble. Most days, it just feels lonely." "I imagine it does." He turned to face her fully. "Delilah, I want to be clear about something. I did not ask to court you out of pity or curiosity or rebellion against the town's stupid prejudices. I asked because from the moment I met you, I saw a woman of dignity, strength, and grace. Every time we have talked, you have proven to be intelligent, thoughtful, and kind. You have endured treatment that would have broken most people, and you are still standing. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary." Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes. She blinked them back hard. "You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Let me prove that not every man is a fool or a coward." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused from work, solid and real. "I am not going anywhere, Delilah. Not unless you send me away." She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face, at those golden-green eyes that saw her as something other than the town pariah. The walls she had built around her heart trembled. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I am afraid to trust you. I am afraid of being hurt again." "That is understandable. I would be more worried if you were not afraid." His thumb brushed across her knuckles gently. "I cannot promise that I will never hurt you or disappoint you. I am human and flawed. But I can promise that I will never betray you the way those other men did. I can promise that if I give you my word, I will keep it. And I can promise that I will face whatever comes honestly, not run away at the first sign of difficulty." Delilah wanted to believe him. Standing there in the vast silence of the canyons, with the sun beating down and the ancient rocks bearing witness, she made a choice. She chose to be brave. She chose to risk her heart one more time. "I would like to keep seeing you," she said, "despite the talk, despite the difficulties. If you are certain this is what you want." "I am certain." He squeezed her hand gently. "Though I think we should prepare ourselves, the town is not going to make this easy." He was right. Over the following weeks, the situation in Moab grew increasingly tense. The gossip evolved from mere whispers to open hostility. Ryder's boss at Copper Ridge called him in for a conversation about maintaining proper appearances. Several ranch hands made crude comments about his choice of companion. Delilah lost several more customers, including Mrs. Chen, who came to her in tears explaining that her husband was forbidding her from associating with Delilah anymore because it was hurting their business. The pressure would have broken a weaker connection, but somehow it only strengthened what was growing between them. Ryder remained steadfast, calling on Delilah openly and refusing to hide their relationship. He defended her when men at the saloon made disparaging remarks, which led to more than one tense confrontation. Delilah found her own courage growing, lifting her chin when women crossed the street to avoid her, meeting their judgment with quiet dignity. They spent as much time together as Ryder's work schedule allowed. He taught her about horses, sharing the finer points of training and breeding that he had learned over the years. She shared her knowledge of the local landscape, taking him to hidden springs and ancient petroglyphs carved into canyon walls. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions on some topics and friendly disagreement on others. And slowly, carefully, they fell in love. It was not dramatic or sudden. It was a gradual unfurling, like a desert flower opening to the rain. It was in the way Ryder showed up at her door during a dust storm with supplies so she would not have to go out. It was in how Delilah mended his clothes with extra care, adding small reinforcements that would make them last longer. It was in shared silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward, in laughter over small jokes, in the way they began to anticipate each other's thoughts. 2 months after their first dinner, Ryder kissed her for the first time. They were in the canyon again at sunset, watching the rocks turn impossibly shades of orange and gold. He had been telling a story about a horse that had outsmarted him repeatedly, making her laugh when he stopped mid-sentence and just looked at her. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You are beautiful when you laugh. You are beautiful all the time, but especially then." Before she could deflect the compliment as she had learned to do, he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, something inside her chest cracked open. The kiss was sweet and careful, full of restrained feeling, and when they broke apart, she found she was crying. "Did I upset you?" Ryder looked alarmed. "No. No, I am just not used to someone treating me like I am precious." "You are." He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You are precious and remarkable, and I am falling in love with you. I thought you should know." The words hung in the desert air, honest and unadorned. Delilah looked at this man who had chosen her, kept choosing her despite everything, and felt the last of her walls crumble. "I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me, but it is true. Then we will be terrified together." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she let herself fall into it, into him, into the possibility of something she had stopped believing could be hers. But the town was not done with them yet. A week later, Ryder came to her house in the evening, his face tight with controlled anger. "What happened?" Delilah asked as soon as she saw his expression. "I was let go from Copper Ridge. My boss said I am an excellent foreman, but my personal choices are causing problems with other ranchers in the area. Apparently, several have told him they would not do business with him as long as I am employed there." The news hit Delilah like a physical blow. This was what she had feared from the beginning, what she had tried to warn him about. "Oh God, Ryder, I am so sorry. This is my fault." If you had not been seen with me, stop." He crossed to her and took her shoulders gently. "This is not your fault. This is the fault of small-minded people who would rather enforce cruel social rules than see two people be happy, and I do not regret a single moment with you. But your job, your position, can be replaced. You cannot." He pulled her into an embrace and she clung to him, guilt and fear warring in her chest. "Delilah, listen to me. I have been thinking about this for a while now, even before today. I have some money saved. Enough to buy land. Start small. There is a property about 15 miles from here near the Colorado border. Good grazing land, water access, room to grow. I was planning to wait another year, but perhaps this is the push I needed." She pulled back to look at him. "You want to start your own ranch?" "I do, and I want you to be part of it." He took a breath and she saw nervousness in his eyes for the first time. "Delilah Jenkins, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other 3 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, away from this town and its poison. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. Delilah stared at him, her mind reeling. 3 previous proposals, and each had ended in rejection and humiliation. The scars from those experiences screamed at her to protect herself, to refuse, to not trust this. But this was Ryder. Ryder, who had stood by her through the worst of the town's scorn, who had lost his job because he refused to abandon her, who looked at her like she was the answer to every question that mattered. "Are you absolutely certain?" she whispered. "Because if you propose and then change your mind, it will break me completely. I cannot survive that again." "I am certain. I will say it as many times as you need to hear it. I love you. I choose you. I want to marry you and build a life together. Nothing and no one is going to change my mind." She searched his face, looking for doubt or uncertainty, and found only steady conviction and love. The leap of faith required felt enormous, but for the first time she believed she might survive the fall. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking. "Yes, I will marry you." The joy that broke across his face was like sunrise. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, deeply, with all the passion they had been carefully restraining. "We should do it soon," he said when they finally broke apart. "I do not want to give this town any more opportunity to interfere, and I need to close on that property before someone else does." "How soon?" "Next week. We can go to the courthouse in Grand Junction, make it legal and official, then start our life together." It was dizzyingly fast, but the alternative was waiting and giving the forces aligned against them more time to work. "Next week," Delilah agreed. "I will need to pack up the house, decide what to keep and what to sell. Keep whatever matters to you. We will make room." They spent the next 7 days in a whirlwind of activity. Ryder negotiated the purchase of the property, signing papers that committed most of his savings to 160 acres of grassland and scrub with a small cabin and a creek running through it. Delilah sorted through her belongings, keeping her mother's treasures and her essential tools, selling or giving away the rest. She closed down the sewing shop that had been her livelihood and her prison, feeling both grief and relief. The town's reaction to their engagement was predictably vicious. The gossip turned ugly, with people saying Ryder had been trapped, that Delilah had seduced him, that the marriage would never last. Mrs. Patterson told anyone who would listen that it was a scandal and a shame. The bank refused to give Ryder a loan to supplement his property purchase, citing his poor judgment in personal matters, but a few voices spoke up in their defense. Mrs. Chen defied her husband and came to Delilah privately, bringing a beautiful embroidered cloth as a wedding gift and tears of happiness. The young doctor who had arrived in town the previous year, himself an outsider, congratulated them warmly. And surprisingly, the owner of the hardware store, a gruff man who had never spoken to Delilah beyond necessary transactions, pulled Ryder aside and told him he was a good man for standing up for what mattered. On a bright September morning, Delilah and Ryder rode out of Moab before dawn, heading northwest toward Grand Junction, They traveled light, with Juniper and Copper carrying packs with their essential belongings. The ride took 2 days, camping one night under the stars with Ryder keeping watch and Delilah sleeping wrapped in a blanket, safe in his presence. Grand Junction was larger than Moab, bustling with mining money and railroad connections. No one knew them or cared about their story. At the courthouse, they stood before a justice of the peace with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street and spoke their vows with hands clasped and hearts full. I, Ryder Ferguson, take you, Delilah Jenkins, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to stand by you, protect you, cherish you, and love you all the days of my life. I, Delilah Jenkins, take you, Ryder Ferguson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand by you, support you, trust you, and love you all the days of my life. The simple gold bands they exchanged had cost most of what Ryder had left after buying the property, but he had insisted. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours, he had said. When the justice pronounced them married and told Ryder he could kiss his bride, the kiss was tender and full of promise. They signed the marriage certificate with shaking hands, making it official and irrevocable. Delilah Ferguson. The name felt strange and wonderful. They spent their wedding night in a modest hotel, in a clean room with a real bed and privacy. Ryder was gentle and patient, understanding that despite being 23, Delilah had no experience in intimate matters. He made sure she felt safe and cherished, and their joining was as much about emotional connection as physical. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Delilah felt a peace she had never known. No regrets, Ryder murmured into her hair. Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. They traveled to their new property the next day, arriving in the late afternoon to see their land properly for the first time together. The cabin was small and rough, clearly built by someone more focused on function than comfort. But it was solid, with a good roof and a stone fireplace. The creek ran clear and cold, lined with cottonwood trees just beginning to turn gold with autumn. The grassland stretched away toward distant mesas, and a small corral and shed stood ready for their horses. It is not much yet, Ryder said, suddenly sounding uncertain as they stood looking at the humble cabin that would be their home. It is ours. Delilah turned to him with a smile. It is ours, and no one can take it away or tell us we are not worthy of it. That makes it perfect. They spent the next weeks settling in and preparing for winter. Ryder worked from dawn until dark, repairing fence lines, reinforcing the cabin, stockpiling hay and firewood. Delilah cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, made curtains from fabric she had brought, organized their limited supplies, and started a small garden plot for the following spring. They worked side by side, building their life piece by piece. It was hard work, harder than anything Delilah had done before. Her hands, already rough from sewing, developed new calluses from hauling water and splitting kindling. Ryder came in each evening exhausted, muscles aching from labor. But there was deep satisfaction in it, in working toward something that belonged to them. They were not completely isolated. The nearest town was a small settlement called Red Creek, about 8 miles away. It was much smaller than Moab, just a general store, a blacksmith, and a handful of houses. The people there were friendly in a reserved way, more concerned with survival than social hierarchies. When Ryder introduced Delilah as his wife, no one questioned or judged. It was refreshingly simple. Ryder began building their herd carefully, buying 2 cows with calves and a young bull from a rancher who was moving away. He traded work for a small flock of chickens and built a coop to protect them from predators. Every decision was made thoughtfully, with an eye toward long-term sustainability rather than quick profit. We are going to build this slowly and right, he explained to Delilah one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. I do not want to overextend and lose everything. We will grow as we can afford to grow. I trust your judgment, and she did. Watching Ryder work, seeing the careful planning and knowledge he brought to every task, Delilah understood that she had married a man of genuine competence and wisdom. "I have been thinking," she said slowly. "Once we are more settled, I could start taking in sewing again. There are not many options for that kind of work out here, and the women in Red Creek might appreciate having someone local who can handle alterations and mending." "That is a good idea. Every bit of income will help, especially as we build up." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We are partners in this, Delilah. Your work matters as much as mine." The simple respect in his words made her throat tight with emotion. To be valued as an equal partner, not just a helpmate, was still new enough to surprise her. Winter arrived early and hard. By November, snow was falling in earnest, blanketing their grassland in white and making travel to Red Creek difficult. They were snowed in for days at a time, dependent on their preparations and each other. The cabin stayed warm thanks to the good fireplace and Ryder's diligent woodpile. They rationed their supplies carefully, supplementing with game when Ryder could hunt. Those long winter nights, huddled together against the cold with the fire crackling and the wind howling outside, became some of Delilah's most treasured memories. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. They played cards and read aloud from the books Delilah had brought. They learned the rhythms of each other's bodies and hearts, becoming truly intimate in every sense of the word. "Are you happy?" Ryder asked her one night as they lay in bed, blankets piled high against the chill. Delilah considered the question seriously. Her life was harder now in many practical ways than it had been in Moab. She worked longer hours, had fewer comforts, lived with uncertainty about their future, but she was free of judgment and scorn. She was loved and cherished. She was building something meaningful. "Yes," she said honestly. "I am happier than I ever thought I could be, are you?" deliriously. "Sometimes I wake up in the morning and have to remind myself this is real, that you are real and mine. I am real, and I am yours as you are mine." Spring came late but glorious, the snow melting to reveal tender green growth. Their cattle had survived the winter well, and the cows were pregnant again. The chickens began laying in earnest. Delilah planted her garden with seeds she had carefully hoarded, and Ryder began the work of expanding their fencing to utilize more of their grazing land. In April, a letter arrived from Mrs. Chen. It had been forwarded through Red Creek's tiny post office, and Delilah opened it with trembling hands, not sure what to expect. The letter was brief but warm. Mrs. Chen wrote that she missed Delilah and hoped she was well. She reported that Moab was still full of gossip about the scandal, but that several people had begun questioning the narrative, especially after Thomas McKinney had courted and quickly dropped another young woman, showing his pattern of behavior. Mrs. Chen's husband had softened his stance, admitting that perhaps they had been too quick to judge. She closed by saying that if Delilah and Ryder were ever in the area, they would be welcome in her home. Delilah showed the letter to Ryder that evening. He read it and smiled. "I am glad she reached out. You needed at least one friend from that time." "I have been thinking," Delilah said carefully. "What if we invited her to visit? In summer, when travel is easier, I would like her to see that we are well, that this life we are building is good. Then we should write back and extend the invitation. Our home is humble, but we have room and hospitality to offer." They sent the invitation, and to their delight, Mrs. Chen accepted. In July, she arrived with her husband, making the journey from Moab in their wagon. The visit lasted 3 days, and it was wonderful to show them the ranch, small as it was, and demonstrate that the choice Delilah and Ryder had made was bearing good fruit. Mr. Chen, who had been part of the group pressuring Delilah through his wife, took Ryder aside on the second day. Delilah did not hear the conversation, but when they returned, Mr. Chen bowed to her formally and apologized in careful English for his treatment of her. It was a small thing, but it mattered deeply. Over the next 2 years, their ranch grew steadily. Ryder proved to be as skilled as he was hardworking, and their herd increased. Delilah's sewing business became established, with women from Red Creek and beyond seeking her services. They saved money carefully, reinvesting in their land and livestock. They built a larger barn and added a room to the cabin. They survived droughts and harsh winters, sickness and setbacks, by working together and never losing faith in what they were building, and their love deepened. The passion of early romance matured into something richer and more resilient. They learned to communicate through difficulties, to support each other through frustrations, to celebrate small victories together. They became not just lovers but true partners, each one's strength compensating for the other's weakness. In the spring of their third year together, Delilah realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never been certain she would have children, had half convinced herself it might not be possible for her. And pregnancy and childbirth carried real risks, especially out here far from major towns and hospitals. When she told Ryder, his reaction was pure, unfiltered happiness. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, worried he had been too rough. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Delilah, we are going to be parents. Are you ready for this?" she asked, her own fears showing through. "Everything will change. Everything already changed the day I met you. This is just the next beautiful part of our story." His certainty helped quiet her anxiety. They prepared carefully through the summer and fall, making arrangements with the midwife in Red Creek, stockpiling supplies, building a cradle from smooth pine. Ryder became even more protective, insisting on doing the heavier chores and fussing over her in ways that were simultaneously annoying and endearing. The baby came in December, during a clear cold snap between storms. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly a full day and night. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Hart, stayed throughout, guiding Delilah through each stage. Ryder refused to leave, holding Delilah's hand and wiping her face with cool cloths, offering words of encouragement even when she was too exhausted to respond. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Delilah collapsed back against the pillows, shaking with exhaustion and relief. Ryder had tears streaming down his face as Mrs. Hart placed the cleaned and wrapped baby in Delilah's arms. "A boy," Delilah whispered, looking down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the miniature fingers that curled around her thumb with surprising strength. "Ryder, we have a son. He is perfect. You are perfect." Ryder kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, debating various options. Looking at her son now, Delilah knew with certainty, "James, after your father." Ryder's face crumpled with emotion. "Are you certain we could name him after your father?" "I never knew my father." "But you loved yours, and you have told me so many good stories about him. Let our son carry that name forward." "James Ferguson." Ryder tested the name, then smiled through his tears. "It is perfect." Those first months with baby James were exhausting in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. The baby woke every few hours needing to nurse, requiring diaper changes, crying for reasons they could not always decipher. Delilah's body needed time to heal from the birth, leaving her weaker than she liked. Ryder took on even more of the ranch work while also helping with the baby whenever he could, functioning on minimal sleep. But there was also profound joy. Watching their son grow and develop, seeing his first smile, hearing his first laugh, these moments made every difficulty worthwhile. James had Ryder's coloring but Delilah's eyes, a striking blue-gray that seemed to see everything. He was a curious, alert baby, always watching the world around him. "He is going to be smart," Ryder declared one evening, watching 6-month-old James intently study a wooden rattle. "Look at how focused he is." "He gets that from his father," Delilah said, smiling at the pride in Ryder's voice, "and his determination from his mother. This boy is going to be unstoppable." As James grew into a toddler, their lives found a new rhythm. Delilah managed to balance childcare with her sewing work, often stitching while James played at her feet or napped. Ryder continued building their ranch, now with extra motivation knowing he was creating a legacy for his son. They hired occasional help during busy seasons, able to afford it now that their herd had grown to respectable size. When James was 2, Delilah became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because her body had done it before. Their daughter was born on a warm May evening, arriving much faster than her brother had. She came into the world with dark hair and her father's remarkable golden-green eyes, and they named her Rose after Delilah's mother. With 2 children, life became even busier, but also fuller. James took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help with the baby. Rose proved to be a calm, content infant, easier than James had been in many ways. The cabin that had once felt spacious now felt snug with a family of 4, and Ryder began planning an addition. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch in the evening after putting the children to bed, watching the sunset paint the mesa in shades of orange and purple. The ranch had grown beyond their initial dreams. They now had a herd of 40 cattle, 24 chickens, 3 horses besides Juniper and Copper, and had plans to acquire sheep the following year. The cabin had been expanded with 2 additional rooms and a proper kitchen. Delilah's sewing business brought in steady supplemental income. They were not wealthy, but they were secure and successful by any reasonable measure. "Do you ever think about Moab?" Ryder asked, his arm around Delilah's shoulders. "Sometimes, not often." She leaned into his warmth. "I think about who I was there, the woman who believed she was unwanted and unworthy. That seems like a different person now. You were always worthy, they were just too blind to see it, perhaps, but I needed to leave that place to become who I am now. I needed you to help me see myself differently." She turned to look at him, this man who had chosen her when no one else would, who had built a life with her despite every obstacle. "Thank you for being stubborn enough not to listen when I warned you away. Thank you for being brave enough to give me a chance despite every reason not to." He kissed her softly, then smiled. "Though I maintain I was not stubborn, I was simply right." She laughed, the sound easy and genuine. "You were definitely stubborn, but yes, you were also right." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. From inside the cabin, they heard James talking in his sleep and Rose making soft baby noises. The sounds of their family, their life, the beautiful unexpected gift that had emerged from rejection and scorn. "I love you, Delilah Ferguson." "I love you, Ryder Ferguson." The years continued to unfold with the usual mixture of challenges and joys. They survived droughts that tested their water reserves and winters that pushed their preparations to the limit. They celebrated when James took his first steps and when Rose spoke her first word. They worked side by side through long days and fell into bed exhausted but satisfied each night. When James was 5 and Rose 3, they hired a teacher from Red Creek to come twice a week to begin the children's education. Miss Andrews was young and enthusiastic, happy to have students so eager to learn. James proved as bright as Ryder had predicted, picking up reading and numbers with ease. Rose was equally clever but more interested in drawing and stories. Delilah sometimes taught sewing to young women in the area, passing on the skills her mother had taught her. She found satisfaction in mentoring others, in sharing knowledge and seeing them gain confidence in their abilities. Several of her students became friends, and slowly, Delilah built a community that valued her for who she was. Ryder became known throughout the region as an honest rancher and a fair dealer. Other ranchers sought his advice on breeding and land management. He was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association and used that position to advocate for fair practices and cooperation among the scattered ranches. His reputation grew, built on competence and integrity. On a summer day when James was 7 and Rose 5, a wagon rolled up to their property unexpectedly. Delilah shaded her eyes against the sun, trying to identify the visitors. When she recognized Mrs. Patterson from Moab, she nearly dropped the laundry basket she was carrying. The older woman climbed down from the wagon stiffly, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Ryder emerged from the barn and Delilah saw him tense, recognizing the woman who had refused to serve his wife. "Mrs. Patterson," Delilah said carefully, setting down her basket, "this is unexpected." "I am sure it is." The woman looked around at the ranch, taking in the tidy buildings, the healthy livestock, the evident prosperity. "I have come to apologize." The words hung in the air, so surprising that Delilah was not sure she had heard correctly. "I am sorry." "I said I have come to apologize." Mrs. Patterson's face was red, but she pressed on. "I treated you abominably, Miss Jenkins, Mrs. Ferguson. I allowed gossip and prejudice to guide my behavior instead of Christian charity and basic human decency. I refused you service in my store, encouraged others to shun you, and generally made your life in Moab a misery. And I was wrong." Delilah glanced at Ryder, who looked as stunned as she felt. "What brought this on, my daughter?" Mrs. Patterson's voice became thick with emotion. "She is 19 and was courting a young man from a good family. They seemed happy until his father decided she was not good enough. Her father is a store owner, not a ranch owner or mine operator. She was heartbroken, and then the other young men started avoiding her. The same pattern you experienced. And I watched her suffer, and I finally understood what I had done to you, how I had contributed to that cruel system." She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbed at her eyes. "I cannot undo the past, Mrs. Ferguson. But I could at least acknowledge my wrongdoing and ask your forgiveness. You owed me nothing, and I treated you as though you were less than human. I am deeply ashamed." Delilah felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Anger for the years of mistreatment, vindication at this admission, sympathy for Mrs. Patterson's daughter, uncertainty about how to respond. She looked at Ryder again, and he gave her a small nod that said the choice was hers. "I appreciate your apology, Mrs. Patterson," Delilah said finally. "I will not pretend that what happened did not hurt, because it did, deeply. But I also will not hold on to that bitterness forever. I have a good life now, a better life than I might have had if I had stayed in Moab. So yes, I forgive you." Mrs. Patterson's relief was visible. "Thank you. You are more gracious than I deserve." She looked around again. "You have built something impressive here. Your husband is clearly a capable man, and you have a lovely home." "We have worked hard," Ryder said, speaking for the first time. His tone was polite but cool. "We have built this despite the obstacles that were placed in our path, not because of any help from those who judged us. I understand, and I do not expect anything from you beyond what you have already given in accepting my apology." Mrs. Patterson climbed back into her wagon. "I hope your daughter knows she is loved and that her worth is not determined by cruel men," Delilah called as the woman gathered the reins. "I tell her every day now, and I share your story, how you were treated and how you rose above it. It gives her hope." The wagon rolled away, leaving Delilah and Ryder standing in the yard. James and Rose came running from where they had been playing near the creek, curious about the visitor. "Who was that, Mama?" James asked. "Someone from my past who came to make amends," Delilah said, ruffling his hair. "Nothing for you to worry about." That evening, after the children were asleep, Delilah and Ryder talked about the unexpected visit. "How do you feel about it?" Ryder asked, strange, vindicated in a way, but also sad for her daughter that the cycle is continuing. Delilah leaned her head on Ryder's shoulder. "I meant what I said about forgiving her, though. Holding on to anger from that time would poison what we have now. I would rather look forward than back. You are a better person than most. I am not sure I could be so gracious. You might be surprised what you could do. You have taught me a lot about forgiveness and letting go of what other people think." She lifted her head to look at him. "If you had cared about the town's opinion, you would have walked away from me at the start. Your courage made mine possible." "We made each other brave," Ryder said, kissing her forehead. "That is what love should do." The years continued their steady march. James grew into a tall, serious boy who loved working with his father on the ranch and showed a natural affinity for animals. Rose developed into a creative, spirited girl who filled notebooks with stories and drawings. They had their squabbles and challenges, but they were close, protective of each other in the way of siblings who had been raised with love and security. When James was 10 and Rose 8, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. It was a surprise as they had assumed their family was complete, but it was a welcome one. Their third child, another son they named Samuel, arrived in early spring. He had Delilah's dark hair and a sunny disposition that brought constant laughter into their home. With 3 children, their lives were full to bursting. The ranch required more labor than Ryder could handle alone now, so they hired 2 young ranch hands who lived in a bunkhouse Ryder had built. Delilah reduced her sewing work, focusing more on her family while still taking occasional special commissions. The expanded cabin buzzed with activity from dawn until well after dark. Through it all, Delilah and Ryder's partnership remained strong. They still stole moments alone when they could, still talked late into the night after the children were asleep, still found ways to show each other love and appreciation amid the chaos of family life. The passion had evolved but not diminished, matured into something deeper and more sustaining than the early rush of romance. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Delilah with a gift. He led her outside at sunset, his hand over her eyes, and told her not to look until he said so. "Now," he said, removing his hand. Delilah opened her eyes and gasped. Standing in front of the barn was a beautiful paint mare, young and spirited, dancing at the end of her lead rope held by James. "Juniper is getting old," Ryder said softly. "She has earned her retirement. But I know how much you love to ride, and I wanted you to have a horse that is yours, that will carry you through the canyons for years to come." Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks as she approached the mare, who nickered and pushed her nose into Delilah's outstretched hand. "She is beautiful." "What is her name?" "That is for you to decide. She is your horse." Delilah stroked the mare's neck, feeling the warm strength under her hand. "Freedom, her name is Freedom," Ryder smiled, understanding immediately. "Perfect." They celebrated that evening with a special dinner, the whole family together around the expanded table Ryder had built. Samuel, now 2 years old, banged his spoon and made everyone laugh. Rose read a poem she had written for the occasion. James gave a short speech about how proud he was of his parents, which made both Delilah and Ryder tear up. Looking around the table at her family, at the life they had built together, Delilah felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about the young woman she had been in Moab, bitter and hopeless, convinced her life was over before it had really begun. She thought about Ryder walking into her world like an answer to prayers she had been afraid to speak. She thought about every hard choice, every moment of courage, every day of labor that had brought them to this point. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked quietly, reaching over to take her hand. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," she said honestly. "I am thinking that being unwanted in Moab was the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me here to this life to you. The town called you the woman no man wanted," Ryder said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "They were fools. You were the woman this man wanted most of all, and I have spent every day since grateful that you took a chance on me. We took a chance on each other, and it paid off better than either of us could have imagined." The children demanded their attention again, and the moment passed into the flow of family life. But later, in the quiet of their bedroom, Ryder and Delilah held each other close, speaking without words about the journey they had traveled together and the road still ahead. The years rolled on with their customary mixture of routine and surprise. James grew into a capable young man who planned to take over the ranch someday. Rose's artistic talents developed, and she began selling paintings to travelers passing through Red Creek. Samuel showed signs of being as good with horses as his father, able to calm even the most skittish animals with patience and gentle handling. Delilah and Ryder grew older together, their faces gaining lines that told stories of laughter and hard work, their hair showing threads of silver. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, tested by time and proven resilient. They took a trip back to Moab once when Samuel was 10. Curiosity more than nostalgia drew them, a desire to see how the town had changed and to show their children where their mother's story had begun. The visit was brief and bittersweet. Mrs. Chen was overjoyed to see them and meet the children. The town itself had grown, with new buildings and businesses reflecting the region's increasing prosperity. Several people who had shunned Delilah approached to offer awkward apologies or stilted congratulations on her obvious success. She accepted them with grace, but felt no desire to linger. Moab was the past. The ranch was home. On the ride back, James asked, "Mama, were you really that unhappy there?" Delilah considered her answer carefully. "I was lost there. I believed what other people told me about myself instead of knowing my own worth. It took your father to show me that I had been listening to the wrong voices." "And now?" Rose asked. "Now I know that other people's opinions say more about them than they do about me, and I know that the right person will see you for who you truly are and love you for it, not despite it." "That is good wisdom," Ryder said, smiling at her across the children's heads. "You should listen to your mother. She is a very smart woman." When Delilah was 45 and Ryder 47, they celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. James had married a kind young woman from Red Creek and was running the ranch with Ryder's guidance, planning to take full control within a few years. Rose had moved to Denver to study art formally, sending long letters home filled with excitement about her studies. Samuel, at 15, was torn between following his brother into ranching and striking out on his own to explore more of the West. That evening, sitting on the porch that had been rebuilt and expanded twice over the years, Delilah and Ryder watched the familiar sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had listened to me that first day?" Delilah asked. "If you had accepted my warning and stayed away?" "Never," Ryder said firmly. "Because I knew from the moment I met you that walking away would be the biggest mistake of my life. Call it instinct, call it fate, call it whatever you want. I knew you were important. I thought you were naive and foolish. I tried so hard to protect you from yourself. And I was stubborn and refused to be protected. Worked out well for both of us, I would say." Delilah laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Yes, I suppose it did." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the light fade. From inside the house, they could hear Samuel practicing his harmonica, a cheerful, if not entirely accurate rendition of a popular song. The sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounded them, horses moving in the barn, cattle lowing in the distance, chickens roosting in their coop. "I love you, Delilah Ferguson," Ryder said, as he had said countless times over their years together. "From that first moment until this one, until my last breath." "I love you, Ryder Ferguson," she replied, as she always did. "You wanted me most of all when no one else did, and you gave me a life beyond anything I dared to dream. I will spend the rest of my days grateful for your courage and your love. Our courage, our love. We did this together." As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, they remained there, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting and beautiful. The woman no man wanted had become a woman deeply loved, the mother of 3 remarkable children, the co-creator of a thriving ranch, and the partner to a man who had never wavered in his devotion. Their story was not one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures. It was one of quiet courage, daily choices to stand together, steady work toward shared goals, and love that deepened with time rather than fading. It was a story written in the red dust of Utah, carved into the landscape like the ancient petroglyphs in the canyon walls, a testament to the power of seeing someone for who they truly are and choosing them, again and again, despite every obstacle. And as the night descended over their ranch, With Samuel's harmonica fading into silence and the last light leaving the sky, Delilah and Ryder remained on their porch, holding hands in the darkness, exactly where they both wanted to be. Together. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and the Ferguson family flourished. When Delilah was 50, she became a grandmother for the first time when James and his wife welcomed a daughter they named Delilah Rose, honoring both grandmother and aunt. The baby was placed in her grandmother's arms on a crisp autumn afternoon, and Delilah looked down at the tiny face with wonder, seeing the continuation of their story in new form. "She is perfect," Delilah whispered, tears streaming freely. "Absolutely perfect." Ryder stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his own eyes wet. Like her grandmother. Being grandparents brought new dimensions to their life together. They delighted in the baby, taking care of little Delilah Rose when James and his wife needed help, marveling at each milestone. Rose came home from Denver for an extended visit and painted a portrait of her parents holding their granddaughter, capturing something essential about the love and continuity that bound their family. Samuel eventually decided on ranching, working alongside his father and brother to continue building what Ryder and Delilah had started. The Ferguson Ranch became known throughout the region as one of the most successful operations, run by a family that valued integrity and hard work above all else. But success and comfort never made them forget where they had come from. Delilah made a point of mentoring young women who seemed lost or uncertain, seeing in them shadows of her younger self. She shared her story honestly, holding nothing back about the pain and rejection she had endured, but always emphasizing that other people's judgment did not define their worth. "You get to decide who you are," she would tell them. "Not the gossips, not the people who reject you, not the ones who try to make you feel small. You decide your value and then you find people who recognize it. Never settle for less than being truly seen and cherished." Many of those young women went on to build successful, happy lives, and they often credited Delilah's wisdom and example with giving them courage during their darkest times. In this way, the pain of her past was transformed into purpose, helping others avoid or survive similar trials. Ryder, for his part, made sure to treat all the ranch hands and workers with respect and fairness, regardless of their backgrounds or reputations. He knew too well how quickly people could be cast aside and dismissed. Under his leadership, the Ferguson Ranch became known as a place where hard work was rewarded and loyalty was mutual. Several young men who had struggled to find acceptance elsewhere found their footing working for the Fergusons and went on to successful careers of their own. As they entered their 60s, Delilah and Ryder gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting James and Samuel take the lead while remaining available for advice and support. They had earned their rest, though neither was content to be idle. Delilah returned to her sewing with renewed passion, creating intricate quilts that told stories in fabric and thread. Ryder worked with the horses, training them with the patience and skill of decades of experience. They traveled occasionally now, taking trips to visit Rose in Denver and exploring parts of the West they had never seen. But they always returned to their ranch with relief and joy, knowing it was home in the deepest sense of the word. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a large celebration, inviting friends from throughout the region. Nearly 100 people gathered at the ranch to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend. People spoke about Ryder's steadfastness and Delilah's grace, about the family they had raised and the example they had set. When it was their turn to speak, Ryder kept it brief. 30 years ago, I met a woman that everyone else had decided was unworthy of love. I had the good sense to ignore them and the great fortune that she gave me a chance despite having every reason not to. Everything good in my life flows from that day. Delilah, you made me the luckiest man alive, and I fall in love with you more deeply with each passing year. Delilah, normally more comfortable with actions than words, found herself wanting to speak as well. I was 23 years old and convinced my life was essentially over when Ryder walked into it. I had accepted the town's verdict that I was unworthy, unlovable, deficient in some fundamental way. Then this stubborn, wonderful man refused to listen to anyone, including me, and insisted on seeing me as I truly was. He gave me back myself. He gave me a life I am proud of, children I adore, and love that has sustained me through every challenge. Ryder Ferguson, you wanted me most of all when no one else did, and I have loved you for it every single day since. There was not a dry eye in the gathering as they embraced, these two people who had faced down judgment and scorn to build something beautiful and lasting. The years beyond were gentler, marked by the quiet pleasures of long marriage and deep companionship. They watched their grandchildren grow, with James and his wife eventually having 3 children total. Rose married a fellow artist in Denver and brought him home to meet the family, and they all approved of the kind, creative man who clearly adored their daughter. Samuel courted a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and their wedding was a joyous affair that united 2 respected families. Delilah's health began to falter when she was 68, a persistent cough that turned into something more serious. The doctor from Red Creek came regularly, doing what he could, but it became clear that time was catching up with her. She faced her declining health with the same quiet courage she had brought to every other challenge, refusing to complain even when the pain was evident. "I have had a good life," she told Ryder one evening as they sat together watching yet another sunset. "Better than I ever imagined possible. I have no regrets, no unfinished business, just gratitude." "You are not leaving me yet," Ryder said fiercely, though his voice shook. "We still have more sunsets to watch together." "We do," she agreed, taking his hand. "But when the time comes, I need you to know that you gave me everything. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I believed I was unlovable. You built a life with me that exceeded my wildest dreams. Whatever time I have left, whether it is days or years, it is all bonus because I already got more than I ever thought possible." Ryder brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You gave me just as much. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You worked beside me to build this life. You raised our children to be good people. You made every single day better just by being in it. I cannot imagine this world without you in it. You will not have to for a long while yet," she said with a weak smile. "I am stubborn, remember. I am not going anywhere until I am good and ready." And true to her word, Delilah rallied. The cough lingered but did not worsen. She regained some strength and was able to return to her quilting, though she tired more easily. They adjusted their expectations and routines, but their love remained constant. They made it to their 35th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Delilah was thinner and more fragile, but her mind was sharp and her spirit undiminished. At the celebration, young Delilah Rose, now 10 years old and remarkably like her grandmother in temperament, asked to hear the story of how her grandparents met and fell in love. Ryder and Delilah shared the telling, taking turns with the narrative they had perfected over the years. They did not soften the difficult parts, the rejection Delilah had faced, the scorn they had both endured, the real costs of their choice to be together. But they also emphasized the joy, the partnership, the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful together. "The lesson," Delilah told her namesake granddaughter, "is that other people's rejection does not diminish your worth. It only reveals their inability to recognize value. The right person, the right people will see you truly and love you accordingly. Never settle for less. Never believe you deserve less. Wait for the one who wants you most of all and then build a life together that proves the doubters wrong. And be stubborn," Ryder added with a grin. "Sometimes you have to be stubborn to get the life you deserve." The laughter that followed was warm and full of love, the sound of a family that had been raised on the foundation of that stubborn, courageous love. Delilah lived 3 more years, making it to 71. She spent those years savoring every moment time with Ryder, watching her grandchildren grow, seeing her quilts bring joy to others, riding freedom gently through the canyons she loved. When the end came, it was peaceful. She fell asleep in Ryder's arms in the bedroom they had shared for over 3 decades and simply did not wake up. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Women she had mentored spoke about her wisdom and kindness. Customers spoke about her skill and integrity. Her children spoke about her love and strength. And Ryder, though he could barely speak through his grief, said simply, "She was the woman no man wanted until I had the privilege of being the man who wanted her most of all. She made me better. She made everyone she touched better. I will love her until my last breath and beyond." The grief was profound, a hole in Ryder's life that nothing could fill, but he was not alone. His children and grandchildren surrounded him with love and support. He continued living on the ranch, still working with the horses, still watching the sunsets, still carrying Delilah with him in every moment. He lived another 5 years, dying at 77, sitting on the porch where he and Delilah had spent countless evenings together. His last words, spoken to James who was beside him, were about her. "Tell your mother I am coming. Tell her I kept my promise. I loved her from that first moment until this one, my last breath." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple marker that read, "Delilah and Ryder Ferguson." She was known as the woman no man wanted. The cowboy wanted her most of all. Together, forever their story became part of the family's legacy, told to each new generation as an example of courage, love, and the importance of seeing people truly. The ranch they built continued under James and then his children, always run with the integrity and fairness that Ryder had insisted upon. The quilts Delilah made became treasured heirlooms, passed down through the family, each stitch a reminder of her skill and love. And sometimes, on clear evenings when the sunset painted the mesas in brilliant colors, family members swore they could feel the presence of their matriarch and patriarch, still watching over the land they had carved from wilderness and hostility, still together, still loving each other with the fierce devotion that had defined their remarkable lives. Their legacy was not just in the land or the family business, or even the children and grandchildren who carried their names and values forward. It was in the example they set of choosing love despite opposition, of seeing worth where others saw only rejection, of building something beautiful and lasting through partnership and unwavering commitment. They had proven that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with acceptance but with defiance, not with ease but with courage, not with society's blessing but with 2 people brave enough to trust each other against the world. In the end, Delilah was right. Being the woman no man wanted had been the best thing that ever happened to her, because it brought her to Ryder, who wanted her most of all. And that wanting, that choosing, that steadfast love had been enough to build a life worth living and a story worth remembering. Their love had transformed rejection into purpose, scorn into strength, and loneliness into the deepest companionship. It was a love that had defied the odds, outlasted the doubters, and created ripples of goodness that spread far beyond their own lives. And that, in the end, was the truest measure of their success, not the ranch they built or the wealth they accumulated, but the love they shared and the example they set for all who came after. They had taken broken pieces and created something whole. They had found each other in the wilderness of human cruelty and built an oasis of love and respect. They had been, in the truest sense, partners in every meaning of the word, and their story would echo through generations as proof that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a life around. The woman no man wanted, and the cowboy who wanted her most of all, had written their story in the red dust of Utah, and it would never be forgotten.